Yes. Mr. Breaker.
Present.
Dr. Cross. Dr. Kroll.
Present.
Mrs. Lehman.
Here.
Mr. Neely.
Here.
Mr. Red.
Here. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Every board meeting has two opportunities for public comment. The first session of public comments at the beginning of the meeting is strictly for items that appear on this meeting's agenda for discussion or action. The second session of public comments at the end of the meeting is for other communication that is not necessarily on the board's agenda. In order to speak at this meeting, members of the public must complete a card with their name and topic and turn it in prior to the beginning of the first segment of public comments. If you wish to speak and have not turned in your card, now is your final opportunity. The Board of Education will take all comments under consideration and respond, if necessary, in a timely manner. We ask that your comments address the Board of Education and not the audience. We will limit your comments to five minutes. Participants are expected to conduct themselves with civility and respect and follow the guidelines outlined in the board policy. Since we have no discussion or action items, all public comments will be in the second session. So with that, we will move on to reports, starting with administrative reports.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Tonight we have a number of presentations for you. These are annual presentations that we do. The first will be for our activities and athletics for the junior high and high school. So we will introduce Ms. Adolphson, Associate Principal at the high school, and Mr. Scott Jones is here as well, Athletic Director of the high school. And Chris Carter is here in the place of Mr. Hammond, who's had a family medical emergency. So Mr. Carter will present for the junior high. So Ms. Adolphson, I'll give you the floor.
All right, hello everyone. First of all, thank you for giving us the opportunity to talk to you tonight. At the very beginning of the year, Dr. Smock brought up that one of our pillars that we really wanted to emphasize and start looking into is how to engage our students. So the students that are not necessarily engaged right now. And part of that is through having conversations, talking to community, talking to staff, talking to students, and really kind of getting a feel of what students need and what they want out of their educational experience. We all know that athletics and activities is not the only thing that kids go to school for, but it is definitely a motivating factor. So if we can provide that motivation and give them a reason to be here, then we want to make sure that we're able to do that. So my portion will start with just a little bit about the activities. It's not cheap.
Oh, you keep talking.
Okay, I'll keep going. It'll update in a little bit. So currently we have 69 different opportunities for athletics, activities, and clubs at the high school. And this includes both student and school-led groups. During the first semester and second semester, and then throughout the year, there are different things that are available. So something that's available in first semester might time out and not be available second semester, and some of our activities and clubs run year round. So it kind of varies with, there you go, what's available during what time of the year. One of the things that we try to make sure that we do is we always keep activities and clubs open. So we have a form that if students are interested in creating a new club or activity, they can submit the form. What we ask for them to do is to do some research. So figure out what is your club's description, what are your goals, what are you going to be doing, is it nationally affiliated or not, or is it something that you're just creating? And then we also ask them to try and help find a teacher sponsor, because that is something that we have to have just for supervision purposes. We have to have somebody overseeing the group, whether it's student-led or a school organization, we need to have somebody there. So we do task them with trying to find someone with an interest of whatever subject area they're looking at. So there's just a variety of things that ran during first semester, and there's more beyond that. We're actually just approved another student-led club today during one of our admin meetings, so it's going to continue to grow and ebb and flow with our student population. So that's kind of the beautiful thing about this is it's not set in stone. If we have students that are no longer interested, things can phase out, but we can also bring in new and fresh ideas as our students change. So this is just to give you an end of the year report from last year, 22-23. We had about 1,066 students. There were 75 options throughout the year. And then we had over 2,000 registered participants. So some students do multiple activities, some do just one. Our most involved student was involved in 11 different activities or athletics, which is pretty amazing number to think about. So our kids are definitely taking advantage of those opportunities. And you can see that with our percentage involved was 80.5%. So that is a huge number, I feel like, especially at the high school level. So looking ahead and keeping in mind some things that, for us to think about as a whole, it can be difficult to find interested and qualified coaches and sponsors. So that's something that we're going to continue to work on. And getting our teachers interested in participating and doing things outside of school. The list, like I said, will change. So like you saw on the other screen, 75 activities and clubs last year. Now we're up to, it said 69, but now 70 activities as of today. So it'll go up and down as we're able to fill sponsor positions and as the kids change in their interest level. And our kids are heavily involved outside of school too. We can't ever forget that. And so I don't think we can ever reach 100% involvement, even if we would love to, and I think that sounds amazing and we can always go for that. But we have a lot of kids that are involved in their churches, volunteering outside of school, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, doing club and travel sports that we don't have at the high school level, and just a number of other activities, including working. Once they get to high school, a lot of those students start to make the decision that they're starting to prep for their life after high school. And so some of them, that means focusing on their career and what they're going to be doing. And so getting into our co-op work program and having internships and doing those sorts of things. So it may not be that they're involved with us, but they are being involved. And so I think we'll keep an eye on those kids and we'll definitely look at that unengaged population when we are doing our tallies, but just also keeping in mind that there might be other things that they're doing too, not necessarily with us, but outside of the school walls. And the last thing that I would say is I'm just my own personal pitch. We are doing a Dueling Pianos fundraiser. A lot of our activities and clubs do not have sponsorships or necessarily a budget line, and so this is my every year I do this. This is our 4th year or 3rd year doing it, to just kind of get a pot of money that we can help to facilitate, whether it's supplies they might need, it's shirts, it can be a whole variety of different things. And so it also helps pay for example, Skills USA, they're a pretty expensive group. So they attend a lot of events, they have a lot of needs, technology, materials. And so this helps us to fund those and to keep them running at the high level achievement that we're getting. And they're definitely pouring back into us. Our kids are volunteering in our elementary buildings and going back and serving time with them. We have, for Skills USA and FFA, they've been working and doing like volunteering, cleaning up roadside. They are building things right now for our special ed department. In the elementaries, they're building staircases. So some of our students on their IEPs have physical therapy goals where they have to be able to climb stairs and go down, but we obviously don't have those available in all of our buildings. So right now they're creating and building staircases to have in those buildings so they can practice. So I think it goes beyond just what they're doing outside of school. They're really pouring into the community in the belief that we can make each other better. So I think that's the beautiful thing about activities and clubs is it's that opportunity to really shine for our kids. So that's it for me, but I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Jones. Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
Thank you for letting me stand in for Scott. Junior high activities and clubs are similar to what we've done in the past. I would like to say ditto to all the things that Mrs. Adolfson just said about how we handle clubs and trying to get kids involved, and those change on occasion. But right now, for sports wise, we did add a couple sports this year. Our cheer and dance teams now are competing, and so when it comes to Title IX, they now count as far as an athletic team. And actually tomorrow is a state cheerleading competition, and then this Saturday is a state dance competition. So kids are real excited about those events coming up. It should be a good time. And we've got more and more kids going out for the teams. One sign of successful teams is unfortunately the worst part of it is tryouts and cuts, and we continue to have lots of kids trying out, which requires us to have cuts. And so that's one sign that we're seeing increased interest in what we have to offer. And then our clubs, we've got over 20 clubs again this year. We're looking to add pickleball. Our biggest hurdle with that, I think, is finding a location, time of year when there's not something, a bunch of other things going on. So I think Mr. Hammond's planning for like maybe possibly springtime to do that. So that's an up and coming activity. We're hoping maybe Dr. Smock would be interested in being that club sponsor. He says he's really good, and we just figure if he's so good, maybe he could impart some of that ability onto our kids in that fashion. So we'll see about that.
You don't want to settle for second best, get his wife.
Sure.
That's a fact.
We're trying to provide as many different opportunities for kids, and we've got our clubs listed right there have great numbers, and it's going very well. So.
Thanks, Dr. Teeter. There we go. Good evening, everyone. Thanks again for having us out today, and thank you for your patience as we've had to reschedule with you a couple times. It's a busy time of year at the high school, obviously, for our events. We've got girls' senior night tonight, boys' senior night coming up on Friday. Obviously, pink night, game ball, just happening, a lot of great things, and then not just great things athletically, but great things for our community, for fundraising, for our kids giving back, and those are things that I think I'm most proud of with our coaches and our programs that we do is we give back. Every program we have does some sort of a fundraiser that gives back and offers service to our community. So I think that's something we'll continue to do, continue to push for, and we appreciate the support that you give and all of us doing that. We're up to 28 sports offered right now at the high school, 60 total teams. We have the breakdown for you on that with 61 coaches now. I do have the spreadsheet with the sports participation numbers. I know that's quite a lot. When you look at it, I've got a 10-year history with breakdowns for everything on that. I think it's important that we keep tracking that data. And we know exactly what is happening, our growth, where we're getting stagnant or where we're dropping, and then gauging our kids, making sure we're surveying, finding out what they're interested in, and what we want to do and add or go to moving forward. So there's some really important things. And with our surveys that we did coming out of COVID, we identified those new sports, and we have competitive dance, competitive cheer, bowling, which has been incredibly successful this year. Boys just went to state. Girls just had their regional this past weekend. 4 of the girls got out of the regionals. So again, lots of great things happening. But again, the cooperation, the support of everybody in our district, our parents, everybody just moving forward with that. We're going to be able to keep adding, keep doing things that are going to keep our kids involved and adding to their interests. As you see down there for last year, we have 371 roster spots for our girls, 423 for the boys. And with our trends like that, we still stay right around the 5 to 6% for more as far as more boys than girls involved in our programs. We're trying to find more ways to bring about interest and get more of our female athletes involved, finding things. We do have badminton, which is a sport that was identified that we're looking at heading. We want to make sure we get that involved, which is a predominantly female sport through IHSA. We think we would add that as an intramural to start, as there's no teams within probably 100 miles or more to get that kicked off. But if we can get that interest going, then we can look at adding into tournaments on weekends and starting with competition that way. To keep people involved. We had about 22 girls who were interested in starting that badminton intramural as soon as this spring, if we can get that going. Numbers over the last 5 years, as you've seen, again, that goes back to our participation spreadsheet. You'll see that it's about 12% increase. It's pretty steady over the years. It keeps going up. And again, as we add new programs, that'll continue to climb. Those are great things, but with that comes some challenges that all of us know. And as I identified on there, just from a facility standpoint, some things that we have in the plans to fix. I just making sure we talk about some of those things. Obviously, the weight room is the most used classroom we have in our district. It really is the most, it is used at 6 o'clock in the morning. And that goes straight through every hour of the day, is used during Potter hour, is used after school and in evenings. So something I definitely want to make sure as we look at those renovations and we do that we're looking to the future with how we can accommodate and keep those kids working out and getting healthy and living healthy lifestyles. And I love the support for that, the East Gym, the training rehab room. Storage is always a problem anywhere you go. And I don't know any school who has even built a new school and doesn't have storage issues right off the bat. We'll continue to find ways. We're working with Rodney Shook, with Bobby, trying to just find ways to be creative about how we can go up with storage, whether it's with the wrestling mats going up into the ceiling rafters or building, racks into the tall rooms to make sure we can store things that are out of season. So we're just always looking for creative ways to solve those issues. We appreciate that. Practice facilities with growing programs, same problem. We have pretty much maxed out the use of the elementary gyms. And then those gyms are getting used by community groups, the Heat and so on, soccer throughout, 7:30, 8 o'clock at night every night. And so again, those are challenges that we will have to continue to look at as we expand our programs. Funding, as you know, and the cost of business has gone up for everybody. As we look at things, we're finally able to get equipment now in a timely manner. We're coming out of COVID, we were on about a 6-month backlog for anything substantial. Shooting machines, baseballs, softballs, we just could not get anything. It's finally getting back into that, but it's not coming without a cost to everybody. So those are up about 20%. Officials' cost, as we are going through that negotiation with the Middle Illini right now, are going to go up about 17 to 22% across the board. Obviously, the cost that you're seeing with our facility upgrades, things like that. And then, of course, with all that comes entry fees we pay to take part in wrestling tournaments and basketball tournaments and all these other things have all gone up because all the other costs have gone up. So just again, I just want to make sure you're aware of that when you see my budget coming through in March and April and all of our budgets that they're going up substantially. Some of the things, the other hurdles we have are following, and Jamie talked about it a little bit, is finding qualified and interested coaches. Sometimes, with new teachers coming in, they're a little more apprehensive to take on coaching roles. They're worried about it. It's just something, and then finding ways to make sure we keep them and finding ways to offer professional development and support and making sure I'm doing those check-ins and we're just taking care of them. Those are really big challenges that we are facing, and if you see the turnover in coaches over the last several years, it's happening in every district. It's not just a Morton thing, it's happening everywhere. One of the big things that I would continue to fight and try to find are qualified, interested female coaches. It's an underrepresented gender that we need to make sure we have better role models and great people in place for our female athletes. So we're going to continue to look for that. I was talking about when we're trying to find certain teachers or coaches, instead of going fishing for them, we're going hunting now. And it's really something that we got to go after. And sometimes that means you're finding people at other schools, but you're trying to find ways to bring in the best for our kids, and that's what we'll continue to do. Again, we talked about where do we go from here, expanded offerings with our bowling programs, again, competitive cheer, the new addition of badminton, the emerging sports that are popping up in our interest surveys. Disc golf is becoming very popular with a lot of kids. Trap shooting, which was a new one to me. I know my wife's school, Brimfield, has that. It's become very popular. Archery was one that I had communications with some folks in the community about that they would like to look at adding. And then, of course, pickleball, like Mr. Carter said. I'm not sure I'd hire Dr. Smock for doing that. He's, a little intense when he plays pickleball, but it's okay. Anyway, so those are like the things. There's the things that we're looking at and where we are, where we're going. And I'd love to, if you have any questions, I'd love to talk to you a little more about it. If there's anything you have for us.
I've got a couple things to say before we open it up to questions. First of all, thank all three of you for the presentation and the information. I know we always like to track on the data and get kids more participating in school events and being with their peers. And even though we're primarily an academic institution here, we're about reading, writing, and arithmetic and all those other things. It's so important that kids are engaged in other activities outside the classroom where they can have those peer interactions, those deeper relationships with peers and with staff members, opportunities to show leadership that they don't get in the classroom, opportunities to persevere and sometimes to experience physical pain, through that process, opportunities to present in front of hundreds or thousands of people and to have it perform. And one great example of that was just over the weekend with the junior high musical. Elf was just an incredible display of talent, and all the lines and everything the kids have to memorize. And just think about all the learning that actually takes place that's very well associated with workplace skills. Getting along with people, taking on a role that maybe they don't want to take on, but they need to be part of a team. There's just so many wonderful positives that come out of that. So as Ms. Adolphson mentioned, our initiative is to grow that and we've done that kind of as a phase one of looking at as many opportunities to increase as possible with bowling and all the other things that were discussed. And then as we see, we've got 80% of the high school participating in something. What about the 20%? What about that other, I guess that would be about 200 kids or so or more of how, okay, they're not plugged in, or maybe they're plugged into things we don't know about. They're working, or they're still plugged into other things besides their phones. That's kind of next step for us, is to reach out to those that aren't plugged in and find ways to get them plugged in to either things that we're already doing or things they might be interested in. So that's a little bit about our initiatives, and I'm so thankful for all the coaches and sponsors that give their time for these things, because I don't think you'd want to calculate the hourly rate of pay on these things, but I know they also get a lot of joy out of it. So we're just very thankful for the people that step up, but we do know we're struggling sometimes to find those people. So that's just what I wanted to say about it. Any questions for our team from the board?
Yeah, I'll jump in. So this is great information that our team, from all the way through our elementary, through the junior high to the high school, are giving kids opportunities. There's a bullet point down here at the bottom, and Ms. Brown is going to talk in her presentation about the neurosequential model and some of the work that they're doing with the sports. But the well-roundedness of this also includes one part is getting the information, the feedback loop from our students and from their parents as well. So when we have all these activities and the successes, as Dr. Smock said, like with the junior high play that they did, or musical, we also got to recognize that it's important to get that feedback from the kids on how we can continue to serve their needs and interests and make things better. And so that is one of the things that the extracurricular committee is looking at. We still need to do some work on that. I got to get that back together, get the team back together so we can get that wrapped up. And then be able to share that and get that feedback so we can complement all of these other things that we're doing. On a side note, I did have guard duty this last weekend, and the conversations that come up at guard was about Elf. I mean, so one of the guardsmen was at the performance, and I never would have thought, but they just sat there and spoke so well of the presentation and the number of kids that got involved in that. So kudos to our junior high staff for that.
Okay, any other thoughts or questions for our team?
I was just curious, one of our presenters mentioned surveying students to find new interests and new clubs. Is there also a formal process for perhaps surveying the students who are involved now and formalizing those, or figuring out what's their input on how we could do things better, how we could help our athletes be more well-rounded, those kinds of things?
That is part of the work that we're trying to get accomplished and fold in some feedback loops into what we're currently doing now. And so if I understood what you're asking is kind of reaching out to our current kids that are engaged in these activities and seeing what they can do to either enhance their experience or maybe provide additional opportunities for other kids to get involved. Is that what I'm hearing you ask?
Yes, I liked how you were talking about considering student perspectives as this committee's meeting. And so just thinking, well, okay, kids are wealths of information. I learned a lot from my own, and just thinking, okay, so they're part of the development of new clubs and athletics, how else are they involved in these processes? So that was helpful.
I think anytime we can give kids the opportunity, there's all sorts of research out there that shows that the students that are engaged in extracurricular activities perform higher academically, grade point average wise, than those that don't. And so, there is something to be said about the structure that comes with that, and the discipline and setting a schedule and maintaining multiple activities. And when you think about it, the kids go to school all day. So it's like having a full-time job, and then they spend 2 or 3 hours in the evening before they get back to, the things that they need to do to get prepared for the next day of school. That's a long day, and trying to keep that all in balance. For the high school, you also have kids that, that may need to work or choose to work because that's what they want to do. And so I know I was a student athlete, and when it came time, I stopped my job so I could participate in the sport. But as soon as the sport was done, well, that becomes challenging nowadays because the sports don't begin and end. They seem to be on a continual basis. And so maybe getting that information from those that aren't. So what is it that you are doing? Because there could be value with them, taking on additional jobs in our community.
And how can we help our students prepare for life where we're all having to perhaps work? Or how can we equip them to figure out, or how can we figure out what they need to be able to do their responsibilities and recreate, and interact in that community. So it'll be fun to see.
It is.
Thanks.
There's lots of success stories with all of the programs that we offer, and I know when we talk as a committee, it steps clear back to the front of the line and what's the purpose, what are we trying to achieve, and how well are we doing in meeting those goals. And we heard a lot of positive things of what's happening, but I don't think we want to lose sight of kind of a top-down look, and then look for opportunities to do even better, because we're doing a great job. But how can we do it better? And maybe for a coach, it's how do I do better for those 3 or 4 who are not the stars or whatever. And I think you have to look at opportunities for success, and I know they're doing lots, and we're going to hear more about ways of doing that. But I think you're making an excellent point. And then are we measuring, monitoring all of the right things?
Anything else? Okay, thank you, everyone. Next up, we have our Student Support Services presentation. This is kind of a State of the Union address for Student Support Services we have each year. So welcome up Ms. Franklin, our Student Support Services Director, along with Bethany Scroggs and Stephanie Brown, the Assistant Directors. And we have Katie Bokima from our business office, also to talk a little bit about the Preschool for All grant. So, welcome, ladies.
All right, good evening. Thank you for having us here tonight. Thank you for a couple weeks ago joining us for dinner. Had a wonderful time hosting all of you that evening, and looking forward to sharing some more this evening on what we are doing. It's like a snapshot of what's going on in our department. We have a pretty large department, and so we're going to try to share a lot of information about what we are doing. So just as a reminder, the goal of our department is to create a continuum of services to meet the varied needs of our students and to have a sustaining program that we can adjust our staffing patterns to meet those varied needs as well. So here are the things that we're gonna go through tonight. So we're gonna kind of reflect kind of what we have done over the last few years, and this is gonna be a real kind of quick part, reflect and then look forward on what we are doing. Then we're gonna go through some department updates, the professional development we're providing throughout our department, some program updates, and then lastly, we'll get into preschool for all. So starting first, there's a couple documents linked here. So this first one here is this looking back and looking forward. I'm going to touch on just a few things. So going back 4 years ago, some of the things that we overcame, all things COVID and everything. When we come to remote learning, what that looks like for special education. Then we started looking at our MTSS guidelines and how that is supported through our social emotional needs, our speech, our OT. We updated the dyslexia manual that first year, and we also defined our crisis response procedures for our at-risk events and student threat. And so that was kind of mainstreamed and outlined throughout the district how we were going to respond to that. We also, the next year we added in the FastBridge progress monitoring system, the core vocabulary for our speech and language students. We added in the panorama screener for our 7th through 12th grade students. We created the student support services manual. We kind of needed to have some consistency and everybody needed to know what we were doing. So we created a manual. We set the parameters for our ACEs and our RISE program that year, so we knew what students we would be supporting through those programs. The following year, we started the ACEs program at the high school. We expanded our multilingual services. We also expanded our speech and language services. We provided some PD. We had the IEP 3-part series where we were really looking at breaking down our individual education plans and making sure that we were writing our plans that are with a growth mindset and supporting the growth of our students and meeting their individual needs. In addition to that, we started professional development for all our paraprofessionals throughout the district, and so that was a big thing that our staff was asking for and that we were able to provide. Stephanie came on and she started providing the NME training that she's going to be discussing a little bit later. And then this year we expanded by adding the school counselors to our department, and there's other things there that we've added in that we're going to go through tonight. So that's just a few of a looking back and looking forward. A couple weeks ago when you met with us for the dinner, I'm going to have Bethany talk about this.
Yeah. So when we had the dinner, you might have noticed there was pages on each of your tables. This is the digital copy of all of the departments that we have underneath student support services. What happened was I created a template and sent it out to our staff and just said, explain what you do. Give me your elevator speech in a simple infographic, and they ran with it. So you can see their passion on the paper for what they do and the kids that they work with. So if you want to look through those, I think that it would be a really sweet time to see what they do. So
There's one for every program, and I believe we have one for every related service as well.
yes,
Or close to.
yeah.
So lots of different exciting things, and we will highlight some of that this evening as well. Okay, I'm going to get into, that will pop up hopefully. I'm going to get into department updates. So to start off with, I should probably get to my notes. I kind of got away from it. We have, he's catching up, okay. So right now, in the Student Support Services Department, we have 81.4 staff members. 72.1 of those staff members are certified staff, and we have 9.3 of those that are non-certified. Those non-certified are our nurses and our certified occupational therapists. So that is just kind of an overall look at I'm just gonna stop looking, of our staff. We do have some staff members that we have from Tazewell Mason County Special Education Association, but this is looking at our related services. Most related services we do hire through our district, our school psychologists, we have 4 of them, our social workers, we have 8. School counselors, we have 7, speech and language pathologists, 8.6. And then the codas, we have a little over 2.5, and 6.7 nurses. We do contract through Tesla Mason County currently for our occupational therapist, our physical therapist, and our physical therapist assistant. The occupational therapist through Tesla Mason County is retiring. She currently is with us 4 days a week. She's recommending we need 5. She's recommending that we hire our own, considering that it would be 5 days. And so we are looking to do that. This next graphic, hopefully it catches up here in a second. So it's a kind of a stacked graph once it comes up there. And so if you look at this, the different years are by color. So the 2021 year data is green. The 21-22 data is the purple, and the 22-23 data is kind of like that mauve maroon color on top. And this is looking at, if you remember a couple years ago, I wanted to start collecting longitudinal data in regards to how we're providing services, and these are just some of those things that our service providers are doing, but we were specifically looking at these because we were tracking on how we're responding to all the social, emotional, and academic needs across the district. So you can kind of see we had an increase from the 2021 school year to 21-22 as far as evaluations. We've kind of leveled out last year. I'll be able to provide you, of course, this year's data next year. We had a slight increase in ADHD screenings from the 21-22 to the 22-23. Consultations, you'll see that was a huge increase. Partly why you'll see that big, huge increase in numbers is that wasn't previously tracked. That 15 was probably a little bit on the low side. That was also COVID, so there wasn't a lot of face-to-face conversations going on, and usually consultations are done face-to-face. We have autism evaluations. We had a lot of those during the 21-22 school year. We did see a drop-off last year. Functional behavior assessments. If you may remember previously I discussed that. So whenever we have a student that might have a challenge with social, emotional, or behavioral needs within the learning environment, we will conduct what's called a functional behavior assessment with consent from the parent. And we're looking at what is occurring before the behavior, what is occurring after the behavior, what are the triggers that are producing that behavior, and then we're going to be creating solutions to how to best support the student within the learning environment. So those usually track pretty consistently with our behavior management plans that we do for students to support them within the learning environment. And then those last two are looking at the number of Tier 3 social emotional supports. So if you remember, we have the RTI system, and students at the Tier 1 is the Gen Ed classroom. Tier 2 is your receiving a little bit additional support to the Gen Ed classroom in regards to social emotional support. And Tier 3, maybe it's more individualized on top of that, so they're needing more support. And then lastly are our counseling cases. And please stop me along the way if you have any questions. Oops, for some reason I have that twice. It will be changing here in a moment to our nursing visits. So our we have 6.5 nurses, 6.7 nurses in the district. We currently have 1 nurse and a CNA at the high school, and so that's where there's that 0.7 coming into that picture. We, as of right now, we have seen we're on track to be about the same as last year as far as nursing visits. We do have a pretty high number of nursing visits at the high school that we're problem solving. A lot of those nursing visits, of course, there's the medical needs. They respond to students checking with diabetes and seizures, but we also have a lot of mental health needs that are coming in through the nursing office that they respond to, and then they connect them either with our in-house services or they connect with the parent to figure out what services they need. So that is producing a lot of visits up there at the high school. Okay. Pretty excited about this next part when that gets up there. We're going to be talking about professional development. We provide quite a bit of professional development throughout our department, and it's split amongst us. And we also lean on the other specialists throughout our department. One thing that I'm super excited about this year is the co-teaching initiative we have throughout the district, and that is a partnering between our, well, not always, but a lot of times it's a partnering between our special education teachers and our general education teachers to support the learning. And that creates lots of opportunities for students of decreasing the group size and increasing opportunities for students to get feedback from their teachers, as well as hearing from more than one teacher on a topic and maybe learning in different ways. We also have opportunities throughout the district where we have 2 gen ed teachers that are co-teaching. One of those examples is at the high school, the American Studies. And so what we've been doing across the district, we've had our coaches been working with our coaching pairs, or with our co-teaching pairs. And they're providing professional development on co-teaching. What are the different models? What have you tried? What could you try? And so we're very excited about these increased opportunities for our students, and it also expands on our continuous services as well. CPI, I met with you guys at the end of last year. I talked a little bit about crisis prevention intervention. I'm a trained trainer as well as one of our school psychologists. We provide this to a lot of our staff members throughout the year. It's the verbal de-escalation intervention for our students that are in a crisis. And then in the event that we need to restrain, those are the trained responses. In response to that, we never want to have to put your hands on a student. So Bethany and I were looking into other solutions. The UKERU, that's what the UKERU is, UKERU. We went to a training this fall, and it was a different method of intervening. Of course, it does emphasize on the verbal de-escalation, but it has, instead of a restraint, there is interventions you can use with pads instead. This is something that we would like to implement as a pilot out at Morton Academy. So we're both now trainers of that program, and so we will train the staff out at Morton Academy so we can start that in the fall with the intent of reducing those number of restraints, because that is a more positive situation for our students as well as it is for our staff members. Stephanie and I went through the youth mental health first aid training this fall to become trainers of that. And we will be providing that training a couple times this summer. And so you want to touch on that just a smidge?
Yeah, it's basically a high-level overview of how you can respond. Anyone can respond to a student and adolescent that is experiencing a mental health crisis. It just gives you very tangible steps on what to do. You don't have to be a counselor in order to respond, and it's just a real easy, accessible language to all of us that we can understand how to help an adolescent in need.
I mentioned previously about the IEP series. We continue to provide that to our staff members. Last year we really encouraged a lot of our staff to attend the training, and then we did it again in the summer for any that couldn't attend it during the school year. And then in the fall, as all of our new staff came in, I provided that to them, and our intent is to provide that every fall. So as they come in, everybody knows how this is how we write in Morton, how we write our IEPs. There's lots of different ways on how to write them, but the important thing is that we are consistent within our own system. Same is true for 504. So I provided a training this fall to our counselors and our administrators that write 504 plans. And so kind of in that same light, just wanting to make sure that we are consistent across the district and that we're staying on top of the needs of our students.
Great instruction, great achievement for students with disabilities was a workshop that we sent about 25 people to last Monday. We had administrators there, we had some of our coaches there, and we had our co-teaching teams there, several of them, at least one from each building. The premise of this training was really helping the gen ed, the SPED, the multilingual, the special ed teacher understand how their classroom, when they're co-teaching, should look drastically different. The student experience in a co-taught classroom should be drastically different because you've got 2 certified staff members in there. So we talked a lot about what that looks like, what specially designed instruction looks like, what feedback should look like, what instruction can look like when you've got 2 certified staff members in a room, and how that should increase student achievement. So we had a great time, and the guy was a phenomenal resource. It was basically the best part of my week last week. It was wonderful.
Sure. I'll just touch on conflict resolution. Very excited tomorrow to bring in Gwen Badgerow. She is a retired school psychologist and a trained mediator. She is going to be coming in and she's going to be speaking to all our staff across the district about conflict resolution. We're going to be talking about what is conflict, what does that look like, how do we support it, and how do we grow as a productive team to come to a resolution. And so very excited to have her come in. She's going to be meeting with our elementary and related service and program staff first tomorrow, and then she's going to be meeting with all our secondary staff in the afternoon.
And I'm going to share the rest of this. As you can probably see, one of the things as Lindsay as a leader is, as we are going to support those that are in our department, one of the big tasks is professional development. So it's been a huge opportunity and honor just to work with all of the different groups of professionals. MTSS Boot Camp, that is what Lindsay was talking about earlier, where you have Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3. MTSS means multi-tiered systems of support. And in the summer before school started, we had a group go through a 2-day training where we can look at where you want to be in a system and how we can get there. We had our psychs, our counselors, social workers, and admin come, and we got the feedback that we wanted some teachers to attend, and there were people that didn't get to attend at that time because of scheduling. So they're coming. We're having another 2-day training in March, where we will again go through what this looks like, how we can get better in our system of supporting students. So that is what MTSS Boot Camp is. I'm going to skip it's not NME, it's NME, because I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. That's the bulk of my time with you tonight, and I'm super excited. But Care You, a lot of you know that is the podcast. Don Sturm and I do that together. But it's not only a podcast, we have a book study that we do with our community, and it's been really exciting. This is the second year. We have some people that have followed us through both books. This year with the Care You community, we're reading Never Enough. If you haven't read that, I would highly recommend it. But we had such good feedback about that we're also doing that with our staff. So I get to offer different opportunities to all staff, even if they're not under student support services. And these are 3 books that I offered this year: Never Enough, Atomic Habits, and What Happened to You. I like to pick books that are very relevant to educators, but not necessarily always just education-based. One of my roles is wellness, so I like to pour into the adults that are pouring into our kids, and all 3 of these books do just that. And then Interrupting Bullying and Establishing a Culture of Connection. If you did or have ever listened to Care You, we had Dr. Krista Lay on. She spoke exactly about this, and we are super excited to welcome her to our school in May to speak to all of our teachers. She shared some new research. She shared some new approaches in how you interrupt bullying, and I think it's going to be really great to make sure that we have no assumptions if everybody understands. We just can listen to her most recent research, and I really think that's going to be a powerful presentation for all of our teachers, and our paraprofessionals can come as well. And then NME, which is the Neurosequential Model in Education. This has been my life for the past 8 years. I'm going to share just a little bit about what it is. So this is a brain-based approach. It has been coined as a trauma-informed approach as well. I expand it because everyone in here has a brain, and everyone in here, this applies to all of us. It is different for different people because we're all unique, and our experiences definitely impact the function and the organization of our brain. So what NME does is it's a biologically informed and a developmentally sensitive approach. We look at stress, we look at how stress impacts our brain. Like I said, this is the same for all of us. Right now, my physiology is different than when I wasn't speaking. So my heart is going faster, my temperature is probably a little bit higher than when I was just sitting back there, right? That is because I'm in a more stressful situation speaking in front of all of you. This is the same for the students that sit in our classrooms. So I believe it's not only important for our educators, it's important for our parents, it's important for our caregivers, it's important for our coaches, and I use this in every lens and hat that I wear. So I'm excited to share a very high level with you tonight. So when I speak of stress, you're going to look at 2 patterns of stress. This is all information provided by Dr. Bruce Perry. He is a neuroscientist and a child psychiatrist. and I got to go through his training about 8 years ago, and now I get to train people all over the world. So he is very well known. He wrote The Boy Who Was Raised as a Dog, Born for Love, and What Happened to You. And he wants us to understand these very complex systems in our brain. So I'm simplifying it. But if you look, there are patterns of stress, and we want stress that's predictable, moderate, and controlled. Then it becomes resilience building. You can think of weightlifting. You can't go to the gym, pick up 300 pounds, and be able to lift it and then walk the next day, right? We want to have reps. We want to do it in a predictable manner. We got to do it moderate. This is the same for learning. We teach our students the ABCs. We do that first. It's predictable. We usually do it in a moderate dose. We don't just do the ABCs all day long. So you can kind of see that. The other side is when things are unpredictable, extreme, and prolonged, and that is very dysregulating and sensitizing. So you can see for some of us, we've had experiences that maybe have been on the left side. I would say all of us experienced COVID. That was an unpredictable, extreme, and prolonged experience, which for some was very dysregulating, some more than others, because we didn't know when it was going to end. We didn't know what rules there were. So this is just a great reminder to us that when we are in situations, in learning environments, in sport, that we want students to have a level of stress. We never want to take it away. That steals or robs their opportunity to have resilience, but we need to make sure that there's some predictability. So it's in moderation and it's control. So with that, Dr. Perry, this is his famous slide. It's the heuristic. So this is the brain, but spoiler alert, the brain is actually not an upside down triangle. But this is just a heuristic, which is a picture of our brain. So neurosequential means neuro is the brain and sequential is an order. So the two things we need to remember is that our brain is organized sequentially and it also processes sequentially. So if you look at that, there's the different regions of the brain. The brainstem at the bottom is in charge of the things that I was telling you I was impacted, my temperature, my heart rate. Those types of things are very primal. They take more repetition to change, but it's the same as those of rats. Like we all have these same functions in a brainstem. As you go up, it gets more complex. And if you look up there, you can probably notice that the thing that educators are tasked with is getting to the cortex. We want to teach. We want kids to think. We want them to be able to problem solve. Not only is it more complex, but it actually does not develop until about 25 to 30 years old. So those functions, we laugh when I give these presentations to teachers because some of them aren't even that old yet. So I'm like, you're not fully, no, I'm just kidding. But it takes less repetition at the top. But remember, it's processed and organized sequentially. So when somebody comes in with stress response that maybe is more heightened, the lower bottom functions in the brainstem could be impacted. In other words, we have some students that maybe go from 0 to 100, or some adults that you know maybe go from 0 to 100 because they have a brain, they're in their brainstem, they're not able to think. And you just reflect to yourself if anybody's ever been in a moment where you're like, man, I can't think of who that actor is. And then you get home and you're all by yourself and you're like, it was Julia Roberts, of course, right? It's because in the moment you were probably more in your lower part and you didn't have access. And then when you were calm, you were able to reach that information. This is the power slide that I share with all teachers and anyone that will listen to me really, is that Dr. Perry talks about the sequence of engagement, and this is how we do relationships with anyone. So you see that there is input coming in from the outside world simultaneous to our physiology internal. And in order to get up to the spot where we want our students to be and our adults to be in the reflection and reasoning stage, there must be a state of regulation. They must have a relationship and then they can reason and reflect. And so this is very, very important when we have anyone that is dysregulated. They're not at their best. That is all of us, remember, but it's really important for us to remember this for our students because we want them to learn. And it's not as easy as just telling them. And so this has been really powerful in all the students and educators that I've worked with, and I'm super excited to share it with our district. So last year I created a cohort, and so there were 10 people that came. There's 2 from every building, administrators, social workers, psychs, and we created a cohort and they got to go through the training. Dr. Perry's facilitating it, and they're doing all the teaching and I'm just facilitating. We had a lot of really great conversations. It was a whole year. Simultaneous to that, I did a book study twice for our staff. And then this year, the 7th through 12th grade teachers have a cohort and administrators, and we're doing after-school professional development with the elementary schools because now I have capacity, right? I have the people that are with me. We're going and sharing it with our teachers. I also am offered the book study again, and then just recently, Dee, Scott, and I started a series of Brain on Sports and how this all relates to for our coaches. We've had really good feedback, and I think you'll hear more information from us on that in the future. I could talk about NME all day, but I know we have a time frame. So if anybody have any questions on any of that. Okay, thank you very much.
All right, I'm going to get into a little bit of our social emotional data and programming, looking at some of the data that our psychs and social workers collect for us throughout the year. To understand this graph, the 21-22 school year is on the far left, 22-23 school year is there in the center, and then on the far right there is just fall 2023. This first graph is just our elementary data. I'll give you a second to kind of take that in there. So we did see just overall, we've seen some consistent numbers across here when we're looking at these things. So what the data that we're looking here are the number of the students that transferred in and out of,
You keep talking.
okay, have transferred into a more, more intensive social emotional program. So that's one of the data thing. We had 4 that transitioned in last year and 3 this year. The other thing that we've looked at is the number of students receiving Tier 3 social emotional supports. We had 24 in 21-22, 17 and 22-23. We're at 19 for just fall 2023 this year. The next thing on there was the number of Tier 2 supports. In 21-22 we had 192, 22-23 we had 117, and currently just from fall data we're at 98. So we're trending high for that Tier 2. So we'll have to see where that falls out. We continue to have high needs of social emotional support across all of our elementary schools. The yellow area on there is the number of students who have withdrawn due to social emotional concerns. They've just withdrawn from school. In 21-22, 22-23, there were 4 students each year. This year we have not had any at the elementary. And then the red is the number of students on behavior plans. That stayed somewhat consistent. And then the blue there at the bottom is the number of students that have had out of school suspensions. And so 21-22 is 40, we had 55 in 22-23, and we are at 13 just for the fall. The next one I'm going to look at is the junior high. It's the same data. Their numbers are fairly consistent going across. But I will say that we have had a decrease in the number of Tier 2 SEL numbers of students and the numbers of students on behavior plans. However, we have had an increase in the number of out-of-school suspensions at the junior high this year. It's trending higher. And then for our high school, looking at the same data, so one thing to take note, the 21-22 school years, you're not going to see the green and the orange and on those. Stephanie's been really working with our high school team on our MTSS system, so that's where we're getting those numbers from this year, and so as we move forward, we'll continue to have those numbers. So that's why there's further breakdown in that this year. So we have seen though, there was an increase in the number of out-of-school suspensions from 21-22 to 22-23. This year, we're trending a little bit lower, so that's fantastic. And so we'll continue to monitor that and where we are.
Quick question.
Sure.
The students that withdraw,
Yes.
you mentioned that in 2 different categories. Do we know what happened to them?
Yes, usually we do.
Okay.
This next one is looking at, we support all the students that might be hospitalized for different reasons. Typically, it's due to social emotional needs. We had a huge spike last year in the 22-23 school year, so this is the easiest way to kind of look at this is you know when you're spending more money doing it, then you know that there was more need. We have spent less money so far this year, so that is a very positive trend that less students have been hospitalized due to social emotional needs. So this is looking at our district programs. We have the ACES program at the junior high and high school. And so currently we have, last year we had 16 students across those programs. And that continues, we have about 14 in the program this year. You do see a shift from the junior high and high school. It's pretty much the students were 8th graders and now they are high school students. So those numbers are staying fairly consistent there. Morton Academy last year had 18 students. We've had higher needs this year, so we've had a little bit lower number to respond to those needs. Currently, we're sitting right around 15. That's an ever-changing number, just depending as we're responding to the needs. We've had some great success. We transitioned a student back to their home school earlier this year, actually 2 students, and we're looking at transitioning 2 more students back to their home school, so that is very exciting. It also is exciting that our Guardian Angel home students are transitioning into homes. That also means that they're doing well within our environment. So we've had some positive trends and super excited about the supports that we have been providing there. I'm going to touch briefly on some of our programmatic goals. So I kind of lead out the ACES program at the junior high and high school. So we've been working on aligning our practices on how we're identifying students, how we're tracking data of the needs of those students, and how we're supporting those daily practices. Each of those students are provided with a daily SEL lesson from the classroom teacher, as well as a structured study hall. They have the ability to come in and out of the classroom throughout the school day to support regulation, but the intention is that they do go back to their lesson the next class period. So it's not intended to be we call it a self-contained environment. It's considered more of a resource setting where they are fluidly going in and out of that environment. So we are working on improving our transitions from the elementary to the junior high and the junior high and the high school. That is a challenge, whether this is ACES or our resource program or whatever program it is, just making sure that we're taking all things into consideration as our students are transitioning. It's a new environment. We try to project, we try to think about it, but that's always going to be something that we're going to work on. We also have been collaborating with our ACES program and our Morton Academy program on professional development. We're targeting similar needs, so we've been working together as a team with that. Morton Academy this year, I've been leading out the Morton Academy program with the support of Stephanie and Bethany. And we've had a lot of great progress there. We've introduced 2 social emotional curriculums, the zones of regulation and social thinking. Those 2 programs married very nicely together, and once we build those relationships that our students most desperately need, then they're ready to learn those social skills. And so these are the 2 social skills curriculums that we are embedding into the system. Okay. And to support our students. Along with that, we have created consistent data tracking systems across our classroom that allows us to better make database decisions as we are looking at transitioning our students back to their home schools or to whatever entity that they would be going to. Our future programming that we are looking at doing is creating like a level system that's also going to help us identify, the level system is connected to opportunities for our students within our learning environment. The more positive interactions you have, the more positive opportunities you're going to have, and so we want to increase those, that desire within our students. Bethany has been working with our staff on implementing academic intervention time and specific interventions to our students and their needs, as well as the progress monitoring. Stephanie is working with our staff as well as building the NME practices that she had mentioned within our staff and within our daily routines as well. Our next slide, as you know, I've been talking to you guys now, this will be the 4th year I'm talking about our outplaced students. I really have had, my goal is to bring as many students back into district, to serve them in district as possible. You will note that there has been an increase in students moving to autism programs. That's a need of our students that we try to serve in district, but sometimes there's more significant needs that do need to be served outside in programs like Easter Seals or to the Autism Academy that's in Peoria. We also, you're gonna see an uptick in the privately placed social emotional programs for this year. That's the pink. I guess I should explain the graph too. This kind of goes left to right in regards to years progressively. 2021 is on the left. To the pink in 23-24. So you're gonna see that growth, as I was saying, in the private placement. We had a move-in student, we had a student return from residential, we had some students with needed increased supports, and so that was the increase in that number from 2 to 6. Let's see, we've maintained a student in the Vision program down in Jacksonville. We have a student out at Charter Oak. We have students that we serve homebound as well as medical homebound, and those have stayed pretty consistent. Our students, as far as the significant needs on the far right, those have stayed fairly consistent. We had one graduate, but then we had one move in there. We do have 2 more that are gonna graduate at the end of this year. So we should see a decrease in that. And those are our Schramm students over in Pekin. So this is getting into that dollars and cents. These numbers are actual numbers we pulled from our IV system in regards to our costs. So this chart on the left-hand side, this is before reimbursements. So when you look at those numbers, you'll see how that's trending, and it's trending up. And the reason I put this chart on the right-hand side is so you can see what the increase in the tuition is for these programs. Whenever I've spoken to you, I've always used Hammett School as my tuition rate, so to keep consistent across the years. If you'll take note, the first year I talked about this, it was $57,000 for a student to go to school there. Last year was $67,000. This year it's $92,000-ish and change. So a significant increase and the amount of money it costs to send a student there. And so this was already a discussion 3 years ago, why we wanted to serve students in district. Not only do we feel like it's most beneficial for our students to be receiving their education in our hometown and receiving our curriculums and how we can support students, and then it gives us the control over how our students are progressing, but also there is a significant cost when we're outplacing them. Going on to the next slide though, when you think about our programs that we are providing in district, this is the savings. This is figured after reimbursements. So I calculated this by taking the total amount that we spend for our outplacements, and I'm looking at the number of students that we would have placed out if we didn't have our in-district programming. Okay, and then I took out the reimbursements, which is you have to pay 2 times per capita, right? We're right around $10,000 and change per student, and then you pay that 2 times per capita, and then you get reimbursed 80% after that. So when you add that all together, you take out the costs of teaching staff and paraprofessional staff, that's still a savings of $508,000, $553, by having in-district programs. So not only are we serving students in district and to what we feel is the best way, but also it's a cost savings to our community. Any questions on that? Okay. Program updates. We're getting near the end, guys. All right, so currently we have 556 special education students. We saw an increase of 18 students into the 22-23 and 21 students, increase of 21 students into the 23-24 school year. And then this next graph here is just a breakdown of each building. We had a big class go from the junior high to the high school, so that's why you see that the green, if you're looking at this graph, it's going from left to right. The blue is 2021, whereas the green is 23-24. Otherwise, we've stayed pretty consistent across all of our buildings. And the next, The resource program is our largest program throughout the district in regards to special education. Most of our students are served through the resource program, and this is where that co-teaching really comes into play. We try to serve as many students in the general education environment and that least restrictive environment as we can. So it's in that inclusive environment, but we do provide pull-out services as well. Focus this year, as we've already discussed, is the co-teaching, but also progress monitoring of transition goals. And I'm going to let Bethany take over there and talk about that as well as going into RISE.
Okay. So one of my things I've learned this year about some of our resource teachers is that sometimes Fastbridge didn't meet all of their needs because their transition goals are very different than a fluency goal or a letter ID goal. So we developed a spreadsheet that allows students to track and monitor their grades, and then it also allows them to self-reflect on a skill, one specific skill that's tied to the transition goal. So it goes, right at this point, it goes for like 22 weeks. But every week, they're gonna sit down with their teacher after they've reflected themselves and then see if that's actually accurate, and then develop a plan to implement the very next step for the next week. So we've got a couple teachers piloting it. They were really excited to have something that was meaningful and relevant to the kids. So we'll see how that goes. I'm excited about it. Moving on to the next slide is our RISE program. So you can see we have quite a crew at the high school. You've met some of them in their class businesses. We have a full crew as well at Lincoln. Lincoln houses our K-6 program, and then we have a smaller number this year at the junior high. Our Life Academy numbers, we have 4 right now, and those are going to continually increase over the next few years as a lot of those students in the MHS program transition. So I'm really excited to lead out our RISE program. We've talked a lot as a team this year, getting together during our professional development time, and me being present has been wonderful. We've talked about really trying to improve our transitions between the programs with a vertically aligned curriculum. We are really excited about that because one of the characteristics of these programs, we make lots and lots of progress, but sometimes it can be slow. And it's important that we have things that will carry with our kids, because they need consistency, they need predictability, and they need routine. And that curriculum is the thread that can go all through that. So we're really excited about that. The teachers have also been working on developing a checklist that we can really bring our parents into some of our assessment, and they can let us know what they're seeing at home, what we're seeing in school, what's beginning to generalize from school to home and from home to school. And that checklist is also going to be a beautiful way to show progress over time. So we're really excited about that. Another component of our RISE and Life Academy programs is our community-based instruction. We have our students, we love to see them out in the community using their communication skills, their social skills, transition skills, all kinds of different things can be taught in the community setting. And our junior high program has really been flexing. She's done several collaborations with our K-6 program, and then they're also going to flex up next semester to the high school program. So we're able to maintain those relationships with the kids, and then that improves the transition, because now she has her eyes on the 5th and 6th graders, and our high school teachers have their eyes on our junior high. The kids absolutely love it, and it's been great community for the teachers. Let's see here. I'm ready for the next one. Multilingual. Our multilingual program has continued to grow. I was hired about 10 years ago as the multilingual coordinator, part-time, and I'm super proud of the team and how they've continued to serve our students in primarily the attendance center and then the junior high and high school. They are a dynamic group of educators who are masterful at taking language and making it simplified while maintaining the content standards. So they do a brilliant job, and I'm so happy they're on our team. Together, they serve about 48 students across the district, get weekly services from them. So when you look at some of the areas that we're excited, one of them is additional interventions for our multilingual learners. We're really looking at providing more of a systematic intervention for students that might be outside of the co-teaching realm. We're excited to increase our collaboration with families through bringing back our family nights. And one way that they really try to get families involved is they use what's it's called the Talking Points app. So when you think about all the communication that comes home, if you've got a couple kids, that's a lot of communication. So they do a beautiful job utilizing talking points. Anything that goes home, they're usually texting. It's a texting app. They're texting families and it goes through in their native language from English to Gujarati or English to Spanish or Vietnamese or whichever one they're working in, and say, hey, I just wanted to let you know, look at that pink one. That's important. Make sure they bring a sack lunch. So they're really great at keeping our families updated. They've also done a great job at connecting the standards to field trip opportunities. You might have seen some of them. They got to go to the Abe Lincoln Museum and learn about that, which was beautiful. If you walk into some of these classrooms, you will see a lot of code switching happening, which is a really cool thing to see students going back and forth between English and then their native language, sometimes with their peers. At one point, there was a new student who joined the class, and between English and Spanish, there are a lot of cognates, and they'll often clarify for one another what they are, but for Spanish and English and Gujarati, there are not. So this student held up his hand to the teacher. She stopped, he started speaking in another language and clarified for the student that was new. They have a beautiful community, and I'm really proud of all the work the teachers do in that program. So we'll continue. Okay, we'll continue. On to our early learning program. Right now we have 25 students in our blended program, and then we have 2 other more self-contained programs that have 11 and 13 in them right now. We've worked a lot this year on really looking at different curriculum that we can utilize, some of it we already had in the district, and just making that a more uniform thing that all of our staff members are using. We've implemented Caregiver Connections, which is really a time when me and the teacher can meet with parents to facilitate the journey to kindergarten. It is a journey, and we want to walk with parents as they go through that, and part of that includes tours.
So lastly, we're gonna get into preschool for all. I just wanna touch back to, if you remember back to January 2022, those of you that were with us then, I was talking to you about the increasing numbers in early intervention students or early learning students. And we were talking about space. We were talking about how we're gonna serve these kids. We were talking about staff. We were talking about all that stuff. And we were also talking about we need to increase opportunities for inclusive environments for our preschool students that were receiving special education services. And so we created the blended classroom. And so we've had 2 sections of that, 1 a.m., 1 p.m., and then we've had 4 sections of special education for the last couple of years. And that blended class has been a locally funded program. Okay, and so we've done that to provide the increased opportunity for inclusivity for our students. Also, it's something that the ISBE was checking in with us and identifying this as something, an area of growth for us as well. So that's that ISBE indicator 6 up there. And so from there, that blended program, we kept our criteria really tight, because we had to be able to fluctuate with the growing needs of our IEP kids. So if we had more IEP kids, we needed to be able to maybe flip one of those blended classrooms into a fully special ed classroom. And so we kept those numbers tight because we couldn't necessarily grow beyond our space. Because as you already knew, we only had the 3 classrooms. We couldn't grow anymore. If we had more space, then we would be able to do that. So when this grant opportunity opened up, that's why we applied for it, because if there was a way to grant fund what we were doing, and in addition to the IDEA funds for the special education students, that would better provide support to our students. So that is why we applied for that grant, and we were extremely shocked as to how much we got. That was really surprising, but exciting. And so we've been trying to figure out how do we support this. Since then, we have transitioned those 2 blended programs into a preschool for all program starting in January. Ryan Gilhouse teaches those 2 classrooms, and Bethany's gonna go through a little bit more of that here in a second. But so we were able to use some of those grant funds on for that classroom, and Kitty Bolcom is going to come up here as well. At the bottom of there, I'm not going to go through this document, but we have had several questions that have come up several times, so we kind of created a FAQ document, so that's up there for you guys as well. Just kind of go back to answer those questions. Come here. Oh, there you are. Come on up. Okay.
So I've been working with Bethany and Lindsay plenty, and they obviously take care of the educational side. They throw their acronyms at me, I throw the business acronyms back at them. So this is the business side. So like Lindsay said, we received notice for this grant in May of 23. We were considered a preschool desert. And because of that, it's stated that 107 kids in this area were underserved. And that data was based on the 2020 census data and the 2022 Illinois Early Childhood Asset Map. So like Lindsay said, based on that 107, this grant is funded $3,900 per pupil, so we were awarded $417,000. Now the way that this grant works is a little bit different than any of our other grants. So we applied in June of 23. We did not receive notice that we received that funding until October. So if we thought, in July, when typically we get the responses from our IDEA grants, our title grants, that we were gonna move forward with this, we probably would have flipped one of our classrooms to use that funding. But since we didn't get this until October, and a lot of these other organizations have the PFA, they just don't have the funding, so they can retro back to July 1st. Since we aren't in that boat, we actually flipped one of our classrooms in January of this year, so we could still utilize these funds. So based on the 32 that we have in our current PFA classroom, we could utilize the $124,000. But since we're doing half year, we'll probably only utilize and save about $60,000. Since we didn't have this funding before, we'll use that $60,000 based on salaries, so one of our teachers, 2 paraprofessionals, an administrative assistant, and a bus driver, along with some family events and that Bethany is putting together, and some field trips. So that's all funded under this grant. And because we are a new member of the PFA Early Childhood Grant, we can use 50% of our funding, of the remaining funding. So we use that 124 from the full year. We can use 50% of the remaining funds, so that equals about $140,000 on startup costs, which is huge because PFA has a lot of requirements. So curriculum, equipment, which is a lot because curriculum is huge for this. Playground equipment, storage, supplies, so we can utilize all those funds this year for something that we're gonna use next year. We'll still utilize some this year, but really those startup costs, the majority of those startup costs spending will come in the next few months as we kind of take inventory for what we need. And then through the child and adult care program, we're actually able to reimburse our snacks, which is, it's not huge, but it's still money that we're gonna get reimbursed for, and those reimbursement rates are based on the free and reduced, those paid, so they vary by child. And I know the future is what is really concerning and wanting more information on that. So this grant actually goes to fiscal year 25, and we are awarded the exact same amount. So we will get the $417,000 for fiscal year 25 because it's a 2-year grant. And that is, again, per pupil. So it depends on how many kids we have in those classrooms. So if we have 107 and we meet that full quota, we will get full funding. We'll still receive the 417, but we have to still go by $3,900 per pupil. So, the future after fiscal year 25. With the consolidation initiative that has come out in the recent months with ISB, DHS, and DCFS from Governor Pritzker, the notice of funding opportunity should be coming out soon, no later than March. I am very optimistic in the funding moving forward. Our principal consultant at ISB is very optimistic with the future of this grant. Every time I'm on the phone with her, I ask her, any news? And she said, no, you will know when I know. Just, it's coming. So, but in a few weeks ago, Governor Pritzker also came out with another program called Smart Start. And that's Smart Start Illinois, which is a multi-year plan funding preschool and early childhood in the state. And I had mentioned these preschool deserts at the start. His initiative for this is to have 0 preschool deserts by 2027. So that at least extends a few more years for this grant and beyond. So, any questions?
Okay, so, next slide. All right, so how do we get kids in preschool for all? How do they come to the program? How do they join us? What does that look like? Part of preschool for all very much overlaps with what we're currently doing for early childhood. So we are calling this our early learning program, and you're gonna hear our developmental screening dates. That's how kids often start, is their parents call and say, hey, Mike, I think I'd like to bring my child for a screening. I'm a little bit worried about their speech, or I'm a little bit worried about, they're not running, or they're not using their hands like I think they should. So they come for a screening date. We have 3 screenings scheduled, February, March, and May, and we have 2 spots left in May. February is booked, March is booked, and May, we have 2 spots left. So during this screening, it happens downstairs in the basement. And it's like a station rotation model with a speech and language pathologist, an occupational therapist, social worker, psychologist, classroom teacher. I think that's it. And the students, rotate through, and we do a full screening on them to see if there's any risk factors. If they flag for risk factors, then we're able to say, hey, you know what, we want to dig a little bit deeper and see. And if not, then we just let them have their report, and that's great information for parents to know. Along with the screening is a pretty detailed parent and guardian interview. So this is done utilizing a Google form. Parents can fill this out before they come to the screening, or they can fill it out at the screening. This gives us all kinds of information about what their home is like, if they might have had a difficult pregnancy, if maybe they're, how many children are in the family, all kinds of factors can come out. Any health issues, anything like that. And then the third piece that we like to look at is the income verification. And this is where we ask parents to provide us with their latest 2 pay stubs, or a W-2 or a benefit card. So what you're looking at, those are PFA requirements. Those are things that when they come in and say, how are you guys doing as a program to evaluate us? They'll be looking to see, did you have a research-based screening tool? Do you have your parent interview? Do you have your income verification? And all of those 3 things take us to the weighted eligibility. So once we kind of look at this whole picture of what the child, where they're at in their life, we can decide then who will benefit most from our program. So when we think about weighted eligibility, there's all kinds of factors we can consider for kids that might have them benefit from a program like ours. It could be something like that you have a parent with a chronic illness. That can greatly impact the development of a 2-year-old, of a 3-year-old, of a 4-year-old, of anybody, right? If you have a parent who might be deployed, that could really impact your life and become a factor. If you have been identified and you've been in the early intervention program, maybe you were sent by your pediatrician when you were 18 months old because you didn't have any language yet, and you've been seeing a developmental therapist and a speech pathologist through early learning, that could definitely get you in our program. So there's a lot of different ways that you can join our program, and the beautiful thing is it's a weighted eligibility, so it's kind of like grading on a curve. So there's not a hard cutoff. With other programs that might be government funded or federally funded, they say, no, you have to be here, and if you're above this, we can't take you. That's not what ours is gonna look like. Because we have a program, Peoria, Bloomington, Schaumburg has a program, that all the weighted eligibilities are going to look different because it's gonna reflect our community. So that is something that we really, really, really like, that we can stack them all up and decide who's gonna benefit the most from our program. So once we do that, we notify families in June. We say, would you like to come? Would you like to come to our program in June? And then following that, we expect that we'll probably have a compliance visit within the next few years. I'd be very surprised if we did.
First year.
Okay, next year. And that's where we get notified a couple weeks in advance, and then the state will come in and they kind of look at the 20 different compliance factors that we're tracking on and that we're developing, and they give us some ratings based on that. And Ryan, our teacher currently, has been through that several times, so she's really familiar with what that looks like, and she has flipped her entire classroom to represent and to be a PFA model. And with that, then some of our other teachers also took those components in their classrooms, and the feedback has been absolutely amazing. They love the PFA model. They love the curriculum that they're using, the way they're assessing kids, the conversations they're having with kids. They feel it's very developmentally appropriate and great for kids' growth. So we're excited to see the program here, and
Yep, and provide that opportunity to our community.
yeah.
All right, that is it. I know that was a lot, but are there any questions?
So the screens are full except for 2 slots. How many slots were there total?
There's 19, 14, and 19. So about 60 slots are full.
And you have another screening in August?
Yes, so we're gonna do another screening in August. And what we've heard from different programs around the area is that's when they usually get some of the students that could benefit the most, because they're not calling now for a screening in February. They're coming in August. Yeah. What other questions do you have?
Still absorbing.
What's that?
Still absorbing it all.
So absorbing. Well, it was a lot of information. I will tell you, we pared this down as much as we could.
The 556 number you
Yeah.
shared, does that include the kids that are having speech? Is that a separate category or?
That does include speech. You mean the total number of special education students?
Correct.
That does include speech. Like speech-only students, yes. Anything else?
For the preschool for all, I might have missed it during the presentation, but what's the total goal for the number of students you want to get to?
Oh gosh, that's $1 million question. If we want to receive full funding, let me get to my numbers exactly on that.
107 for full funding.
Yes, so 107 would get us to full funding, but that's just preschool for all kids.
What is our goal for this next year? Like what is the number that you're looking for?
Space dependent.
Yeah.
Space dependent.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so currently, we will only have the 2 half sections. We could potentially flip one more classroom. We're a little concerned on whether or not maybe we just flip one of the like an AM section, so we would still have 3 early childhood special education sections, because we're concerned about still serving that capacity. If we're able to get a couple more classrooms, 6 classrooms ideally is what we need. That's been the same as back in January 2022. It's the same amount. 6 classrooms is what we need. We feel like we would be able to be in a very overall well-rounded, supportive program if we had 6 classrooms. And now we would be funded for it, whereas before we would be locally funded.
So is that 100% funding?
For the PFA, yes. And then the other students are supported through the IDA funds.
Another point to your question, when Lindsay's talking about the students with IEPs, they continually join our program. So that is something super unique about our early learning friends, is that a student who turns 3 in April, they're gonna come in April, and we have to have space for them in April. So that's when she says that things have been kept tight. It's because we are space dependent and we are required to serve them. So if we fill up if we flipped 2 blended programs right now, we would actually have less space for IEP kids than we currently have. And we are required to serve them. So that's something to consider.
So we've reached out to area churches to kind of see if we could partner with them, and so far have not been successful because our needs and their needs, they're not able to support that, just due to the significant amount of time that we'd have to be in their building and the amount of resources we would need to be use in their buildings. So they've not been able to support us. Had a couple other thoughts come through today, so I'm gonna reach out to those as well. And so that's kind of where we're at. And so if we don't have any new space, we're just gonna have the 2 or the AM, PM, and possibly 1 more class for the fall. That's what we will do. So if we were able to have more space, then we will support more students.
Okay, excellent presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. If
Great
you guys have any other
information.
questions, let us know.
Thank you.
As the board might recall, you've talked about building additions for early childhood, and so that's still, that's still in our future, and that's something we're gonna be working on designing. And I know the question arises with programs like this that are grant funded, certainly the question comes up, what happens if the funding dries up? So I think you heard a little bit about what we can expect in the near term, and especially with Governor Pritzker and his initiative, and it's pushing it really strong. I think we're gonna see funding for quite a few years, supported by the state. What happens down the road, for whatever reason, if that funding did dry up, we wanna make sure that we've protected ourselves in terms of how we design any kind of building addition, that facility could be used for any number of uses and not just geared toward an early childhood center alone. If we did have to, kind of back out of providing the service because of the loss of funding, then we would want to at least have a building that we could use for other purposes and other, other programs. If our elementary programs, for example, gen ed programs were increasing, we need to add another 2nd grade, 3rd grade, or whatever, we would have space, because we wouldn't have created a space that could only be used for an early childhood program. We wouldn't have it as isolated as maybe you might envision a program could be. So that's why when we consider off-site locations for a program like this, in a short term, a lease situation, I think you would consider it in a short term just to get the program going before you can build. But that's why I would be hesitant in actually constructing something or renovating something off-site, that down the road, if something happened with the funding, we own a building that we can't really use. So that's just a little bit about things we've already talked about, but also how it relates to this grant. So we're going to continue to be very cautiously optimistic as we move forward, trying to grow the program to the best of our ability, and try to serve as many kids as we can in the program. Yeah.
So is there data that shows the benefit of what happens to these kids that are in programs like this? And then will we be tracking to see if we have that similar results, if there is data already?
I'm sure there's data already, particularly for students that are considered at risk for multiple purposes, multiple reasons. And what's kind of tricky about tracking data is you don't know what would have otherwise happened if they weren't in the program, right? So, but I think our goal certainly is to prepare kids for kindergarten better than they would have been had they not had any preschool experience at all. And even though I don't know, we could probably find the data on that, I think it's pretty solid that kids that aren't accustomed to sharing with other kids, playing with other kids, in that kind of environment where they're listening to another adult, give them instruction. If they come cold right into kindergarten without having those experiences, they're at an extreme disadvantage in terms of behavior and academic learning. So those are, but certainly as we get kids in, I think your point is well taken, that we should track how they perform, how they succeed, and kind of keep track of our processes and how we can continue to improve, so.
It seems to me that we want that data so that we can tell the story.
Sure.
When we strive to get more space.
Right.
Or as we strive to get more space.
That's an excellent point. Any other thoughts? Okay, last, one of the last things that we're gonna talk about is Dr. Sander is involved in something called I Love You Guys training, and many other members of our staff were also involved. I'll let him talk to you a little bit about what does all that mean.
Okay, so when you saw that on the agenda, you're probably like, what does the I Love You Guys mean? There isn't a more just heartfelt, beautiful story of overcoming a tragedy in someone's life and then someone taking that and not having malice in their heart and in putting their efforts to good use that has impacted so many schools, so many communities in this story. And I'll just hit the highlights. So the I Love You Guys was an initiative. The Peoria County, Tazewell Mason, Woodford County regional offices of education contracted with the I Love You Guys Foundation to bring in a couple of presenters for 2 days, January 29th and January 30th. So it was one-day sessions. We had 400 people attend the sessions between the two counties over those 2 days. 34 Morton staff members attended. So thank you to the board for supporting that, because there was a cost for us. We had a lot of staff that were out of the buildings and having to get caught up on various things. And so this is a great initiative, but it was the cost overall for the training was free, was covered through a grant. And so the story goes like this. In 2006, there was a hostage situation at Platte County, or Platte Canyon High School, and that's located in Colorado. And so I Love You Guys was the last text, the last communication by a student whose name was Emily Keys, and that was the last thing that she shared with her parents. Unfortunately, she lost her life that day, and her father, John Michael, and mother, Ellen, used that as a mission to springboard into how do you respond in a crisis event and provide the best services for our students, for our staff, for our community, for all of those impacted. And so this focuses on the standard response protocol and the standard reunification method. Now here's the beautiful thing about this. John Michael could have made a lot of money putting this together, and he said, no, I want this all to be free. Okay, and so all of these resources and materials that have been developed in conjunction that are compliant with NIMS. If I say NIMS, I know that there's at least one person in the room that understands what NIMS is. It's the National Incident Management System, and ICS, the Incident Command System. So all of these things follow the same response protocols, and it's targeted to get people speaking the same language so it can expedite the response actions, okay? So I'm going to send this one this way and this one this way if you want to look through that. So right now there's about 50,000 school districts in the United States that have received the training. Our speaker, our presenter was Stacy Avila. She was the negotiator in the hostage situation, standing right outside the classroom door. Okay. You talk about powerful, absolutely powerful. One of the comments in a survey that I gave to some of our staff said, they've been going to conferences for over 20 years, and that was the best speaker, best presentation. And so she had a lot of great insight, just laid out the material in an incredible way, but the focus is, what do we need to do next? And how can we build a response team? So we did send out the invite to a couple of our EMTs. We had a cross-section of our student support services staff that were there. We had principals. So we had Julie Tharp, our transportation director, was able to attend. And so we've got a lot of work ahead of us, but we're also, and one of the things that came from this training as they were going through about what is the standard response protocol. You know, I've given you after action reports of our trainings that we've done, our exercises. That's one of the things that they talk about, you know, that you need to exercise your response reunification plan. We have done that, and we've got a document that we reviewed and said, hey, what can we do to make this better? So there are a lot of things that we've checked some boxes, but we just know that in the event of a real crisis, these things are going to get out of control really quick. And so after this, I put together with the admin team, the leadership team, they gave me some questions. Ms. Smith gave me some suggestions on what we could do to ask. Valerie also attended. You know, what were the session takeaways? I'm just going to hit some of the highlights here real quick. Locking our classroom doors. Okay, that was one. The big picture of protocol. Who responds, who's in control, who's given the directions. Common language. So these were what our staff provided as feedback, you know, utilizing common language. Once again, someone said locked doors. One of the facts that they said that there's only been 3 fatalities in all of these crazy world, you know, classroom or school shootings. Only 3 fatalities that have occurred behind a locked door. Okay, that's pretty powerful. So it gets us thinking the right way. So the next question is, what are our top priorities? What do we need to know? You know, that's us asking this, you know, group of 34. Preparedness kits, they've got a plan for that. Laminated glass. That was a big thing. I know that Ms. Bolkema's not here. I think she stepped out. We had written that into a school safety and security grant, of which we were not recognized for it, but that means now that we've got this data, we got to put together a plan, come back to the board, say, hey, we need to fold this into our spending plan, how we can start rolling out some laminated security glass, okay? And so that was one. Implementing the correct, you know, the simplified terminology. Then I finally asked, what will make our plan better? And comprehensive training with our school SRO, who's in the back there. Our SRO was also in attendance, correct? All right, so I got that one. Doing things like called tabletop drills. That's where you're not doing a full evacuation, but you're just going through the administrative responses, how you communicate. And we got a lot of work cut out ahead of us. So the next step is that we've got a smaller team. So we start off with 34. That's great. We've got a lot of people that understand the concept, the common language, how we can respond. So what's next? Mr. Saunders, Mr. Carter, Mrs. Franklin, Mrs. Waterfield, Mrs. Smith, and myself are all going to get together. I've got all of the survey data from the training, and we're going to start building our next steps. One of those is going to be response kits. If we go through the I love you guys, we can get that stuff ordered. It's everything from vests to lanyards and ID cards to reunification cards. So when loved ones show up at your facility to pick up their loved one, it's got a standard card. Now, here's the cool thing about why we did this, is that we could help supplement another school district, or another school district that was in attendance could help supplement our staff, because it gives some sort of span of control numbers. And you gotta keep in mind that in the event that something happens, a lot of our staff may not be able to assist in doing these other functions because they're going through their own personal trauma. And so that's this whole concept. It's growing some legs. We're excited about the next steps, but I wanted to give you a brief overview. If you go out to their websites, fantastic material. There's a lot of good video pieces. But if you look at the father and the mother, the Keys, John Michael and Ellen, they're just common everyday people, and I can't recognize them enough for their just approach to doing that, taking a bad situation and making it into what this has become. So, and I'll leave you with this. I was sitting next to Valerie, and after the end of the presentation, I just went on up to tell the presenter, Stacy, what a great. Stacy looked at Valerie across the room. There was 200 people in there and sought her out. Why? I'm putting you on the spot, Valerie. Why did she?
I don't know. She had us raise our hands if we were administrative assistants, because, we're administrative assistants. I don't know. The most powerful thing is those people have formed a family type relationship. I'm talking, they would eat Thanksgiving together with the police negotiator that felt she failed, right? I mean, that day she felt, now, yes, more kids could have died, but she wanted to save Emily. And how that very night they stood with her and they told me, they said, her death will not be wasted. We are not going to take her life and let it be a life of tragedy. We are going to turn it into something. And the power in that, their intention and their fearlessness, and they have not stopped. They're 17 years later. It was just phenomenal.
Thank you for sharing that, and I called Valerie out on that because I think people recognize that it really takes an amazing team to do this. And, someone that's probably been around the United States and given this presentation recognize Valerie, the skill set that she would bring to a situation, the love, the care involved with that. So it was great. I opened your questions. We look at the next step. One of our charges is we've got our crisis plan. They talk about maybe some subtle changes with some of the common language that's in there. And so, we'll be looking at that and taking this from our small group, taking it back to the leadership team. And then in May, we have our crisis committee meetings. And so, what do you want to know? What questions do you have?
So FEMA gives classes through the ICS, as you and I have both taken. Do the teachers and staff, do they have to take certification classes for NIMS and ICS from FEMA?
Great question. So the Federal Emergency Management Agency puts out these trainings, and it's like basic incident command response. So the quick answer to your question is they referenced that. They said, we recommend, and so the ICS, I think it's ICS 200, now has a designation for schools and response actions like that. And so, our police, our fire have those types of training because there's a certain protocol when people respond to an incident. It's usually our police are first on site. So they assume incident command, they're making the decisions in the heat of the moment. Then once the fire shows up, EMS, the fire chief assumes more of the incident command response. And so understanding that, they recommend, you can sign up for these. And I believe most of those ICS 200 level classes are free. So that's one of the things that I need to look at and see if we can push that out. Just on, understanding the big picture concept.
Right, and it's more practice really than the certification. After you get the certification, then it becomes practice as you guys are doing. You guys, what I witnessed last year was really good. So good job on that. Bad things happen all the time, and in this case, good things came out of it. So good for them. Thanks
And
for that brief.
It folds into our long-term emergency response plan. You know, we're gonna continue to do evacuations out of the building and into another location. We can spin up some other injects for the parent reunification. Because that, when they hit that part of it, you know, we got to see a lot of things that could potentially happen on site.
Our second meeting in May, we're supposed to have our crisis management plan review. So probably a good time to add some of that to that and
Yes.
update our security audit and go through all that and see how that all incorporates together, so. Because sometimes it's easy to get lax and say never here, but I'm sure everybody said never here, so.
Absolutely.
The work that you've done or participating in this, it's going to mean a fresh look at everything we're doing.
Yes.
And I think that's great. Otherwise, it's just repetitive, even though everybody puts a lot of work into it. Sometimes when you get fresh eyes and everything, it's great, so.
Well,
I'm
they al-
excited about what you're going to do.
They always talk about communication, my last point. So last year, we built a distribution list for all of our educational partners, all the preschools and private schools in the area. And so we've used that, we've exercised that with some of our snow days, you know? I just go out and send a message to the educational partners. And so that's something that, you know, I'm gonna invite all of those groups back, you know, and try to fold them in. You know, I don't think that they got notified about, you know, this training. Maybe I should have reached out to them and said, hey, go ahead and sign up for this. But that's something that we could assist in the event that, you know, one of our educational partners had something that happened in their facility, you know, and so a lot of great takeaways.
The film for the windows, are there other grants out there? I don't think we would want that to hold us back.
No, we shouldn't. But, you know, what we had folded into this grant was everything from radio communication equipment to access control to cameras to the Windows security film. And so I think that's the next biggest priority. We'll get the team together and kind of identify the top priorities. But that one's pretty significant because every second matters. And if you can delay that, then you start gaining the advantage on it.
Do we lock rooms now?
Yeah, so that's, it was funny, right after that training, I was just up at Lincoln School and we were talking, I asked someone, hey, so what'd you think of the training? And they really enjoyed it. And so we looked and, you know, all the classroom doors have the quick push button lock. So years ago, I don't know if Morton, our facility had to go through and get new cores, but a lot of classroom door hardware didn't have the push button lock. It was just the key on the outside. Well, they did, you know, they showed that in the training, you know, how long it takes for someone under duress to try to put a key into the key lock and lock it. It's really not a successful task. And so we do have that. And so we got to continue to verify that, yes, this stuff we have in all the locations and it works. So we've got a lot of reevaluation of our facilities, always looking at how we can improve it. You never get to a point where it's, you know, good enough.
Well done.
We do have a folder in the drive with the security audit and the updates from that.
Yeah.
It's in there. So,
Thank you. Okay, last thing I have is just, March is coming upon us here. And March was the month when we were gonna start the Morton High School renovation project. But we're gonna start it maybe a little early in terms of some things that they can do starting next week. So, safety is number one concern. We're having a building project while kids are walking the halls and in our parking lots and parents are dropping off. So I know Mrs. Ripka right now is working on a communication to parents to inform them of where's the kind of the no-go zones and how does drop-off look now once we start closing that north entrance and associated hallways. So she's working on that right now. I think that's gonna go out pretty soon because next week we're gonna start barricading off different places around the school. So it's very exciting, but it's also concerning. And our concern again is for student safety and good communication to let everybody know, okay, how are we gonna operate when we're gutting a major part of the middle of our school? So we know we can do this. There's been a lot of meetings and discussions that Ms. Ripka and her team have been involved in, and have every confidence that we're gonna pull this off. Not that it'll be easy, but looking forward to what it will be, it's gonna be worth it. And I realize that we haven't really communicated graphically to our parents and the community of what this is gonna look like. Still waiting on a couple 3D, you know how architects can create 3D imagery of what an interior space that doesn't even exist will look like. So I've got one rendition of that, but I'm waiting on a couple others. I've got a presentation put together. I'll share that in the board meeting so it can be public that way. Also share things in the Powder Post. I'm looking for opportunities to also meet with different community groups to present, whether that's Rotary or the Chamber or whoever would have me, and just to show, here's the purpose, here's the cost, here's some images of what this will look like when we're all done. Because we're really gonna need to see that, because we're gonna go through some pain and suffering, I think, in the meantime. So we got multiple phases of projects that we're doing. The outcome is gonna be a much safer school. A school that operates better than it ever has, a beautiful school, a place we can be proud of, a lot of accessibility improvements in terms of restrooms, locker room equalization and updating. It's gonna be a great thing. So I realize that it's kind of been kept just within the board and seeing the designs and in our administrative team, but trust me, I'm going to be working on pushing that information out and sharing that with the whole community so they can see what we're up to, so.
Have we thought about a community night at the high school in Bertha Frank, inviting people in to
talk about it and to see the images?
Yeah.
I hadn't thought of that. I was thinking of going out, but maybe bringing people in, that might even be.
Try a night that way and
That's a great idea.
send a note home to all the parents and.
Yeah, I like that idea. Even in the midst of it all. But Bertha Frank will be open, so that's good. But it's gonna be an incredible project, multiple phases, and I think it'll be something that we'll all be proud of when it's done. So, good idea, Tom, thank you. That's all I have, unless you have any questions for Joe or I? No? Okay.
President's report, I appreciate you working on the information to share with the public on I'll continue to push hard because I think it's exciting things what we're gonna do there, and I think the public will get excited, and plus it'll make the pain a little more bearable knowing what's at the end. Congratulations to the boys and girls basketball teams for their pink night and their game ball run. Between the two of them, I think they raised over $250,000 between the two of them, so that's pretty exciting. I know the game ball run, some of the people involved with that really appreciated you and Joe's involvement with that and helping them get all the schools involved. I know they appreciated that, so. And the girls are playing right now. What's the score, Deidre?
18-16 Washington.
Okay. And then appreciate the reports we had. We know that it kind of, both reports tonight kind of piggyback with what your plan, your district initiative was when you took over, saying how do we remove barriers and promote education outside the classroom. And I think both of the plans show what we're doing in the district to try to remove a lot of barriers that some students have so they can be successful, and then the extracurricular activities to help them get involved and stay involved. And so I think that's great to hear what we're doing, and we're excited to hear what Joe and your report, what you're gonna have, what the district's doing to make sure we're even doing it better. So I think that's all I had for a report. Now for agenda building. Anybody have anything for that this evening?
I was hoping we might be able to get an update on the high school GPA conundrum. as we're moving forward. I had a conversation with a family from Eureka who were discussing the same issue. So, you know, just hoping that maybe as we're looking at solutions, whether it needs to be just for us or if we need to partner with other regional high schools so that we can optimize for our students, starting early without taking away scholarship money when their GPAs reduce. A parent made a comment that even a 10th of a GPA point could cost $3,000 to $5,000. So it's hard to enroll your child at ICC for their senior year, looking at that kind of penalty if we, as an area, can't figure this out. So anxious to hear how the solutions are coming.
Me too. So we haven't forgotten about this. In fact, we met even recently about it, looking at different options, talking with the high school administrative team, and we've got it started to get it narrowed down on a few different options that we think would be better than what we currently do. And we're looking at, Dr. Teeter has written some pretty incredible spreadsheets that show the impact. So what if we do option 1, option 2, option 3? What would happen to the existing grade point average if it were instead under this scale or that scale, and trying to see what the impact is, would be on that. One of the difficulties, as you might imagine, is our student database system, our computer system that we keep track of all the grades and courses that students take. How can you manage a new system that you might want to start freshmen with, but you've got all these other people in the system that are under a completely different formula for grade point average? So we're trying to understand our own student database management system on how we could even do that. How can we roll something out for one class and not the other? Not the other, I guess it would be 2. Like you're gonna start, you got 3 classes, you know the incoming freshmen, but then what are you gonna do with the sophomores, juniors, and then those are gonna be seniors? So that is one of the bigger problems actually to this. It's not so much just figuring out what the scale is gonna look like, it's about how you're gonna implement it. So we're not done yet. We've got to kind of narrow down to a few options and then trying to figure out how would we possibly implement these. Would we have to keep track of something outside of our system? How would we phase it in? Will our system even go, I mean, I shudder to think about the idea of going back and changing the existing GPAs of students to something else, even though relative to one another it might be fine, but just the shock of like, I used to have this GPA and now it's this. I think maybe the good news kind of in what you said is I think colleges less and less look at GPA. It has less meaning. They look at the grades, they look at the courses that you've taken and whether they're advanced or not. But I think they have less and less impact on college entrance and scholarships. I think they're looking at test scores, SAT, those kind of things more. I don't know, Ms. Ripka, can you verify my?
Yeah, you're right.
Okay. So she's got years as a guidance counselor under her belt. So, but nevertheless, we're starting to see why the system was built the way it was, even though it's really difficult to understand. We're understanding the thought process behind it, but as you said, it's very convoluted. So we're not done yet. You'll hear from us again before this year is out on what our recommendation is, even if that means we have to lock ourselves in a room and not come out until we get it figured out. So, but there's some challenges. I just want you to know there's some definite challenges.
We vote on that.
So thank you for that. You'll hear from us again on that.
And I assume it goes without saying, I mean, I know we're always kind of paying attention to class size and building space and stuff, like the whole, PFA thing and space needed. I'm assuming that's something that's still like is on the committee and planning thing, like we're still vetting that out and actively searching it out, so that's not a plan that gets lost. So don't get behind, right?
Right.
I know we talked about multiple times in the past about the desire and the need, the space, but I know you mentioned it a little bit that, yeah, we're still looking, but this is something. It's pressing if we have a program that's being grant funded and we can't actually utilize the funds because we don't have the space to put the kids.
And in the, in the scope of all the work that we've talked about and how to finance it, if you recall, we had a presentation a few months back about that. One of those pieces was early childhood, and you heard Mrs. Franklin talk about 6 classrooms plus other spaces that might need to be associated with that. Well, that, we haven't lost track of that. That's gonna be on our plan and what we've gotta do in the really short term is to figure out where could that possibly be? How would we fit it into our current buildings? How would it attach or associate with buildings that we already have? And how can we, as I said earlier, how can we build it in a way that it's kind of modular, or it can be used for various programs. If this program goes away, it's still viable for other programs, and it's in a location in a kind of a format that it's not awkward to use it for anything. So, yep, so you'll hear more about that as we, I potentially could be going to bid on a project like that in the fall for the year after, for the summer, for it to be viable next year after that. So how much space do we need? And Morton Academy is part of that discussion as well. Not that those would be next to each other, but they could potentially be similar type of building additions that we've got to determine, okay, what's the space need for that? And as you could see from the presentation tonight, there's a great deal of savings that we do get from having our own internal programs and staffing them ourselves. And it's a better education for the students who need it the most. So when we provide that education, no long bus rides whenever we can, we are financially benefiting also.
We did have a brainstorming session on that a few weeks ago, and I'm pretty sure you sent the clip notes to everybody. So there's that. And then, just for your knowledge, the junior high lunch seems to be, I've got 5 kids that I drive home. They all seem to be okay.
Okay.
Just giving you a update. Now, that's just 5 out of the all.
I'm not asking to the drive.
Sample size.
Do you have a bus license, Jerry? Could use you. All right.
Anything else? With that, we'll accept a motion to accept the consent agenda as presented.
So moved.
Support.
You wanna make a comment on
I
the
do.
donation quick?
Yeah, I do. So in this consent agenda is just a very warm thank you to the family of the late Scott Lynn, who, as you can see, donated over $4,000 worth of fossils and other artifacts. Mr. Lynn was a science teacher at Morton High School for many years, and his family is now donating his collection of, say, $4,000 worth of fossils and other artifacts that he collected for his personal collection over the years, donating back to the school. So thank you to the Scott Lynn family.
Dr. Cross,
Yes.
Mr. Neely,
Yes.
Mr. Breaker,
Yes.
Dr. Kroll,
Yes.
Mrs. Lehman,
Yes.
Mr. Roth,
Yes.
and Mr. Rudd.
Yes.
With that, we'll move on to the non-agenda audience presentations.
Okay, Mr. Breaker, our first speaker will be Heather McMeekin.
Hello, my name is Heather McMeekin on behalf of Peoria, Illinois Now. We continue to condemn the continued violation of the Establishment Clause by bringing in faith prayer leaders, especially those from anti-LGBTQ churches. And tonight I think that one called for the school to serve Christ. I have a Bible quote here for you from the New King James Version. And when you pray, you shall not be like the hypocrites, or they love to pray standing in the synagogues and on the corners of the streets, that they may be seen by men. Assuredly, I say to you, they have their reward. We also have received enough complaints that we now call on Morton 709 to please allow parents and caregivers to simply record IEP in Section 504 meetings. That is a state law in California. That hopefully will be a state law in Illinois before long. It's very odd to find out that you even deny mothers, say, with cancer, or mothers who are disabled veterans, the ability to record their IEP meetings so the non-custodial parent or another parent serving elsewhere has an opportunity to hear what goes on. Your continued denials of that are odd. Please fix that. We also again demand that Mr. Breaker correct his false statements claiming that we called for members to step down or be removed because their Christian faith. No, we called for y'all to step down or be removed because you violated children's rights. And at this time, we renew our call for Superintendent Smock, board members Kroll and Breaker, and anti-LGBTQ principal Michael Saunders to step down or be removed. We once again demand that we call on Morton 709 to put a discussion about racism, homophobia, and transphobia on the agenda and invite families to speak on the record to y'all about their experiences. We advise parents and caregivers dealing with complaints of hate speech, assaults, other bullying to put all complaints in writing, demanding a written response. That creates a record from which you can judge the way that the administration is handling it. The school continues to provide an environment that is majority white. The lack of diversity fails to provide a culturally competent environment. We'd point out to you an example of something that you may not realize, that you reinforce racial bigotry in elementary school children. But when you discipline one of the few black children by sitting them repeatedly in the office, and also allow a white administrator to perp walk them back and forth in front of all their peers repeatedly, you are not just punishing that child, you are reinforcing racial bigotry, bias in the white children, an assumption of criminality, an assumption of ignorance. So if you were a culturally competent environment, you would have had a discussion about this already. But it's not too late. I hope you really look at the way you provide discipline when you are doing it to black youth or youth of color in a majority white school district, because it has an effect. We also call on and advise parents who are dealing with, let me backtrack here, it's been a long meeting. Well, I did point out to your tech people, as a former tech person, it is pretty offensive that they are asked to go along with how you have prayers, and then you ask them to kind of go along with violating our rights and make them an accessory to that by having them not record it on the video so that the audience can't see it. I hope that they speak to their union about that and are protected, because that's not a fair ask. They shouldn't have that as part of their day. To parents of the school district, if your kids are targeting LGBTQ youth or allies for anti-LGBTQ Bible quotes, that your children are committing anti-gay, anti-trans bullying by targeting these children. And they should be corrected at home before they're corrected at school. And the students need to be protected from the use of religion as a tool to torment and bully. White parents of white children, you should know, white people expressing negative opinions of black youth's hair or black people's hair color is called, or anything about their hair is called hair racism. It's traumatic. I'm so happy to see your excellent staff talking about a trauma-informed environment. Please address the hair racism. Punish those, discipline those children appropriately so they never do it a second time. It is a racist form of bullying and reflective of the legacy of white supremacy and control of black human beings' bodies. Talk to your kids.
Our next speaker will be Brian Groth.
Brian Groth, parent of the district and resident of the community. Despite Stephanie's exuberance in her presentation, I'm disappointed not a single one of you had a question about NME. That's a very important subject, something that you all should familiarize yourself with. Another reminder, Mr. Breaker asked you to provide evidence of your claim December 12th that we are calling for removal of administrators or board members due to religious beliefs. To date, you haven't provided any evidence to support that claim, so I ask you for the 4th time to correct the record and remove your false and provocative claim. Dr. Smock, I again ask you to reverse your decision to ban Ms. Woodmansey from these proceedings. Her brief exchange of words with Mr. Fay or Mr. Breaker did not rise to the level of the penalty you imposed. If you had done your job properly, you would have interviewed eyewitnesses to the exchange with Mr. Fay, who initiated the conversation as he was leaving the building. I'm disheartened to hear about a recent complaint of a racially motivated incident at the high school. Despite video evidence of an assault, the complaint manager brought into question the victim's statement of what was uttered by the aggressor when committing the assault. Why is it certain administrators feel it's necessary to invalidate or downplay these complaints, these aggressions against minority groups, and in some cases shift the blames to the victim? Is it because they have a board that finds it too difficult or painful to deal with systemic problems? Or is it a board that traffics in the propaganda of the hate-based organizations that Principal Saunders subscribed to? I'll soon be submitting a FOIA to see if you all have been using school resources in the same manner as Michael Saunders. And on the subject of school prayer, remind you, Mr. Breaker, you said some meetings ago, students wouldn't know where we stand on political or religious views. Well, the school board Christian prayer ritual is sure to put a stamp on where you stand from a religious standpoint. I'll remind you again, it's unconstitutional. 3 of the 12 federal circuits that have taken this up have deemed it unconstitutional, and it does not fall within legislative body provisions. It's considered a school activity, and therefore sanctioned prayer is a no-no. I know all of you are capable of saying a prayer of your choosing before you enter this room. I call on you to do just that from now on. I'm amused by the dance you do when you have the prayer. Sometimes you open the meeting before the prayer, sometimes you open the meeting after the prayer. One thing you are consistent about, you hide it from video recording and from video screaming. I think that says quite a lot. Thank you.
Okay, and our last speaker will be Kathy McNeil.
I'm a peacemaker, but I mean, it kind of seems obvious. Why do you think we keep bringing up the separation of religion and government? Maybe it's because it seems like it's being used as a tool. In, you know, the words against, yes, LGBTQ plus trans people. However, I speak as an individual who's a member of local and national based organizations that promote the rights of all humans, women, workers, persons of color, persons with disabilities, and persons of the LGBTQ plus and trans community. The rights of those who deal with oppression because of their unique and individual expression. In classrooms and educational spaces across our country, a coordinated effort is underway that restricts the rights of students to learn openly and fairly. We are here to insist on fairness and to determine how to stop any censorship and prejudice in schools. Already, 10 states have passed classroom censorship bills that inhibit classroom discussions about important social concerns, like these that have been brought up already. If schools are found in violation of classroom censorship laws, when they are, they risk losing funding of those schools. In some cases, teachers have faced formal admonishment or lost teaching licenses when they have not fully allowed for the rights of all students. All of it leads to a chilling effect on academic freedom in our country. And one example is we would like to stress the importance and significance in allowing the recording of IEP parents, staff, conferences in families with members who have a disability. Why wouldn't you do that? This needs to be understood and changed based on these special needs. You know, special needs is not just in minors, it's in adults too. That's just the way it is. Every young person has a First Amendment right to read and learn about the history and viewpoints of all communities, including their own identity in and outside of the classroom. So do we want to erase the legacy of lived experiences of Black and brown people, women and girls, LGBTQ plus individuals, people who are extremely religious in their history and the good things that they have done? No, we don't want to erase those. That would deny them the option of thinking for themselves. So please join us as we work to broaden rather than restrict the students' understanding of themselves and the world they are growing into. I speak as an individual who is a member of local and national-based organizations that promote the rights of all humans, women, workers, persons of color, persons with disabilities, and persons of the LGBTQ plus and trans community. The rights of those who deal with oppression because of their unique and individual expression. I believe in the inherent worth and dignity of every person. I believe in justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. I accept all people and encourage their spiritual growth, whatever theirs might be. I consider it to be free and responsible for us to search for truth and meaning. And I believe in the right of conscience and the use of democratic process within our congregations, our schools, our communities, and societies at large. And I believe the goal of world community is peace, liberty, and justice for all. And I also respect the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. And I just ask you to think of the peacemakers and that we're not here to attack or tell you that you can't believe what you believe, but please don't put it on us because it is the law. And it does make us very uncomfortable, really. It makes me very uncomfortable. Not just because I may not believe in the same thing someone's saying, but what about the other people and how they feel, you know?
Thank you. We will now accept a motion to enter closed session for the purpose of discussing negotiation and personnel.
So moved.
Support.
Mr. Neely?
Yes.
Dr. Cross?
Yes.
Mr. Breaker?
Yes.
Dr. Crawl?
Yes.
Mrs. Lehman?
Yes.
Mr. Roth?
Yes.
And Mr. Rudd?
That will take 5 minutes to tear down.